Hey, this is Metal Mike, and welcome to the new installment of Metal for Life. This one is called Open Throttle. But for this column, we are not going to be talking about necessarily fast guitar riffs and shredding licks. We are going to be talking about opening up our guitar rhythms and chord choices with some other additions that have open strings and different intervals on top of them that will really open up your guitar ideas and will help you orchestrate stuff to sound nice and big. All right? Check this out. Okay, so let me show you what happens in this example. For this one, I don't only do a down pick on it as far as the rhythm. There's a little bit of a combination. So it's basically, you know, down, down, up, 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 down, up, down. So I sort of, you know, depending how these chords are sounding to me, I would change the picking slightly, you know, to get a good sound on it. But I pretty much keep the picking fairly uniform for all the chord patterns that I play. So for the most part, the picking is starts with some down strokes, goes to the up strokes, and then there's a combination of down and up. And this example, it basically uses different variations of an F sharp and a C sharp chord. The first chord is always a power chord followed by some sort of a variation of it to show you how the new chords sound. So we start off with a basic F sharp power chord. And we go into this, to me, it's a Steve Vai chord. I know it's not really the technical way of thinking about it. It's an F sharp 7 with an add 4 right here on that B note. I know you could hear some Steve Vai notes in there. So you basically want to be a little bit careful of not jamming all the strings so it sounds sort of like, you know, out of tune. You want to be careful which notes you accent. Okay, so that was the second chord. After the regular F sharp, you go into this F sharp 7 add 4. The third chord is a C sharp power chord, followed by a C sharp sus2, but I sometimes leave the top two strings open, so you get this nice wide. It sounds really dense. It's very cool. I'm going back again to the F sharp power chord. And I jump right here to play this F sharp right now, which is F sharp. You got a major third and an octave. And sometimes I throw the top two strings open as well. It's got a nice dense sound, except it's higher up the fretboard. For the remaining two chords in this example, I go to the regular C sharp power chord. And I finish it off on this chord right here. So you basically have it's also like a sus2. You have a 5, the second, you have this chord, which is the 9th, and I also open the top two strings. Even though when I play the example, I sort of stuck to the 5th, 4th, and 3rd strings. Okay, so for the next example, I am going to show you a fairly simple and common chord progression. And I want to show you by just changing some of the chords slightly harmonically, you can come up with a really well orchestrated, triumphantly sounding example, all right? Let me show you. Check this out. So in a very basic form, this chord progression is E, D, G, A, and again a G. Right, so this will be a very basic way of playing it. But the idea is how you get some sort of a triumphant sound out of it. So I'm going to show you two of my favorite chords, and one of the chords when I play with the E is a basic E power chord with the D note right on top. It's a Jerry Cantrell chord. This is where I learned it from. It's got that little bit of like a jar of flies type of chord from that record. So instead of just chugging on the E, I have this. Right, so you hear that D, that 7th coloring it, the progression. And one thing you will also see me doing, I'm hitting the bass note and then going for the top strings to give the chord progression a movement as well as sort of like a percussive drum-like almost feel. Right, so you have a melody in the bass and you have the orchestration on top. So when I showed you this example, I already gave you the second chord. So remember we had the E, which I used this progression, this form, going into the D. But instead of playing just straight up D chord, I use a chord that I took from Angus Young. And so basically a D chord with an F sharp in the bass. And this fits very well in my progression because I have a E. So when I move into my G chord, which I play like a regular open G string, a G chord. So my melody in the bass is E, F sharp, and G. When I go to my A, it's an interesting thing that I do because it's a regular A power chord on the bottom. and I kind of repeat the whole thing in an octave higher. Which gives you like an A power chord, but a little bit of a bright tone on top of it. And for the G, for the final chord, the G chord, you will also see me use a chord that I showed you guys in the previous columns, which is right here. And for this G chord, I play this, the G, the B, the third, and I sprinkle a little bit of the top strings for it too. And that's a progression. This is how you could take a very simple, stocky chord progression and add something cool to it. All right, so our last example has a cool metallic treatment of a common chord progression. And this is something that maybe a band like Queensryche would do. So this progression that I'm going to show you consists of chord D, B flat, C, B flat, G for just a split second before it resolves to D. So you'll have, the chords will be okay, that's a standard stocky way of playing it, but I'll show you how to metalize it. Check it out. Okay, so let me teach this example to you guys. One thing you'll see that when I'm playing each inversion of the chord, I have actually the bounce open strings, the D string. So you'll have the slightly muted root strings, the D note, and then I bounce it off to an open now chord. So you have that kind of it drives the rhythm forward. So you have a tight bottom and you open up on top for the chord to shine through. I'm starting with a basic D chord on the beginning. And one thing you guys will have to remember about playing parts like that you really want your fingers right behind the frets so these chords sound nice and clear and well intonated. This is for guitar, this is a sort of like a tricky area here, that second and third string. A lot of the chords, you really have to pay attention to how these chords are popping up. So we have this D chord that we start the example with. And I move it, the B flat chord I'm playing, I'm basically moving up my first finger up a fret. Right? So instead of this chord, I'm very simply moving the same thing up 2 frets higher. Okay, so the last part in the example is I imply the G chord by playing the third and the second string open. Also, you find yourself doing is that as you come out of this chord, this is also a G chord right there, so you might have one of those. Which is completely cool and fine. And you'll see that I'm using like a pretty funny finger pattern here, which is my first and the third fingers. But I just found out it works the best for me to get a good chord out of it. So it's, whatever works that makes the sound pretty good. And again, a band like Queensryche is really good about getting those chords perfectly on a record. So listen to some of that stuff and good luck with it.